You've heard about drone warfare, but have you ever seen 2,000 of them move as one? Over Kharkiv, that's exactly what happened. It started with silence. 30 jamming drones carving a digital corridor through Russian interference. Then came the buzz. Thousands of FPV drones and Switchblade 600s launched from hidden positions. In under 15 minutes, a 300 tank assault evaporated. But none of it would have worked without one man pressing a trigger he knew he wouldn't survive. Why did his death decide the battle? Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Before a single drone launched, the battlefield fell silent. 30 Ukrainian jamming drones dropped to tree level, their rotors slicing through the night air as they carved out a corridor of silence where Russian radar once screamed across every frequency. For a few moments, the sky above Kharkiv stopped listening. In that void, an American-made Global Hawk flew at 60,000 feet, orbiting just beyond missile range. It fed an encrypted stream of signals back to a steel door bunker buried under Kharkiv's industrial zone, a command nerve center packed with analysts and drone pilots watching green screens pulse with coded data. Every second counted. Down there, the team believed they were tracing the ghost of Russia's main electronic warfare command post, the kind that could paralyze an entire drone network with one burst of interference. The first strike looked flawless. 10 Switchblade 600s, each the size of a backpack missile, streaked in low following coordinates from the Global Hawk. When they hit the target, the blast lit up the valley, an eruption of static on satellites and handheld encryptors. Officers in the Kharkiv bunker thought they had punched a hole through the jamming grid. But then came the twist. The noise didn't fade. It thickened. The static doubled, swallowing their own communications in a rising wall of interference. Monitors glitched, positional markers blinked out, and the operators realized they hadn't hit the enemy's eye. They'd struck a decoy. The real Russian electronic warfare core was still alive, hidden deeper behind the armored lines. That decoy truck had done its job perfectly. It pulled Ukrainian detection systems into revealing the frequency bands they were using, their launch timing, and even the bandwidth rhythms of the Switchblade network. Every pulse told the Russians how Ukraine's battlefield automation worked. Within minutes, the decoy's burn mask fed Moscow's own EW crews the intelligence they needed to trap the attackers inside their own digital maze. Commanders watched helplessly as comms stuttered back and forth, images froze mid-frame, and artillery data streams broke apart mid-sentence. It wasn't just the machines that jammed. The people did too. Confusion spread through the bunker as reports contradicted one another, while 300 Russian battle tanks, shielded under renewed jamming cover, rolled toward the Kharkiv Red Line. The entire operation had hinged on a single assumption, that the loudest signal was the real one. On this front, that rule had just been rewritten. In modern warfare, deception is no longer painted camouflage or false positions. It's weaponized silence. Intelligence officers later called it a contest of signal and silence, where even a millisecond of transmission can give away an army's location. When data becomes the weapon, visibility itself turns fatal. Reports from field analysts describe the Russians' move as electronic art, using layers of false returns and phased radar sweeps to make the battlefield appear inside out. Ukraine's drone swarm was paralyzed, not by firepower, but by misdirection woven into the spectrum itself. Inside the bunker, they needed something that algorithms couldn't interpret: intuition, a human edge. 2 reconnaissance volunteers, codenamed Kestrel 1 and Kestrel 2, broke radio silence and offered to track the real source manually. They knew the corridor above them was collapsing fast, but if they could find where the jamming pulse originated, they still had a chance to restore control for the swarm waiting in reserve. Their orders were short and almost handwritten: localize, confirm, and exfiltrate before Russian armor reached grid 4-19. Then the feed cut out. Every other channel stayed dark. Minutes later, the bunker received only 2 coordinates. The signal came through faint and cracked, but it was enough to trace the live Russian EW command truck hidden between 2 Tunguska systems. Pinpointing it was one thing. Hitting it would take something else entirely. A signal not from a drone or satellite, but from a man. A human mark bright enough to cut through chaos. Deep inside a scorched farmhouse north of Kharkiv, one soldier switched on a laser knowing it would light his own death warrant. His call sign was Kestrel 1. He and his partner had crawled 3 kilometers through churned mud and snowmelt to reach the vantage point. Through a broken window frame, his view was narrow but clear enough to see the faint thermal outline of a Russian electronic warfare command truck. The coordinates from their handheld rangefinder matched what the bunker had received earlier. It was the real hub, a mobile node shielded by 2 Tunguska systems tucked behind armored carriers, both scanning non-stop for any laser reflection or heat bloom that could reveal its position. Those Tunguskas were built to shoot down drones, but in this fight, they were hunting the man who dared to point first. Ukrainian command had seconds to act. The electronic warfare field was cycling, preparing to restart its full-spectrum jamming. Once it came back online, the swarm waiting above the front line would go blind again. None of the automated targeting systems could lock without that laser signature resting on the truck's roof. The decision fell not to an algorithm, but to one man holding a compact designator that hummed faintly in his gloved hands. He looked toward his partner, gave a single nod, and pressed the switch. The beam shot invisible across the valley, bouncing through dust stirred by artillery blasts. Instantly, the Tunguska radars pivoted toward the origin. Their targeting arrays blinked alive, tracing a narrow cone of detection back to the farmhouse walls. For the soldiers in the bunker, the timing appeared as raw data, just 9 seconds between confirmation of the target and the launch authorization. But for Kestrel 1, those 9 seconds stretched into slow motion. The first Tunguska cannon fired, chewing apart the upper wall. Shards of brick and dust tore across the room. Still, the laser stayed fixed. A pulse indicator confirmed the range lock, feeding coordinates into the drone control net. Up above the noise, one Stiletto-class drone accelerated past the altitude ceiling, banking hard to evade counterfire. It wasn't built for stealth, it was built for speed. Its tandem warhead, seated in a titanium shell, locked onto the reflected signal cutting through the haze below. As it dove from 3,000 meters, the drone's onboard system filtered hundreds of false signals from the jamming layer. A digital hurricane of interference and ghost pings. Only one source remained constant, that laser dot fixed by a soldier in a burning farmhouse. The Stiletto moved through the static like a knife through gauze, its flight pattern stabilized by the human mark guiding it. In less than 4 seconds, it struck. The impact punched through the command truck's roof at 1,200 kilometers per hour. The detonation folded the vehicle in half, killing every transmitter running inside and collapsing the Russian jamming matrix in a burst of electromagnetic feedback that rolled across 10 square miles. Inside the Kharkiv bunker, the effect was instant. Screens cleared, data feeds snapped back. Drone operators saw live video streams reappear one by one. 2,000 electric motors whirred back to life as control links reconnected. Across the combat net, silence turned to motion. Drones, loitering for minutes in standby, now spun toward their assigned targets with renewed precision. One soldier's laser had opened what every commander was waiting for: a clear sky of communication. The strike over Kharkiv may be remembered not for the hardware that carried it out, but for the decision that triggered it. A single human impulse bridged the gap between silence and control, showing that courage still defines the tempo of modern warfare. The age of drones, algorithms, and autonomous systems still bends toward the person who chooses to reveal themselves in the noise. Each technological edge depends on that one moment of human clarity. So what defines strength now? The precision of code, or the will of the soldier who presses the trigger knowing what the cost will be?